Hello viewers, today happens to be the birth anniversary of legendary film director Satyajit Ray. Ray was just not a film director but a great literature too, and he has written a number of short stories as well as series like the Feluda series and Professor Shanku series. Today in this particular video I am going to read out a short story of his. In English it was translated and it was titled Mr. Eccentric. The original story was written in Bengali by the film director himself, and it was titled Batikbabu. So let's go ahead with the story Mr. Eccentric. I never managed to find out Mr. Eccentric's full name. All I did learn was that his surname was Mukherjee. His appearance was quite unforgettable. He was nearly 6 feet tall, his body was without the slightest trace of fat, his back arched like a bow, and his neck, arms, hands, and forehead were covered by innumerable veins that appeared to be bulging out of his skin. What he wore almost every day was a white shirt with black flannel trousers, white socks, and white tennis shoes. And he always carried a stout walking stick. Perhaps he needed it because he often walked on uneven, unpaved roads and amongst wild plants. I met Mr. Eccentric 10 years ago when I used to work for a bank. That year, I had taken 10 days off in early May and gone to Darjeeling, my favorite hill town, for a holiday. I saw Mr. Eccentric on my very first day. At about 4:30, I had left my hotel for a walk after a cup of tea. In the afternoon, there had been a short shower. Since there was every chance that it might rain again, I had put on my raincoat before stepping out. As I was walking down Jalapaha Road, the most picturesque and quiet road in Darjeeling, I suddenly spotted a man about 50 yards away. He was standing where the road curved. His body was bent forward and he was leaning on his walking stick, gazing intently at the grass by the roadside. At first, none of this struck me as unusual. Perhaps he was interested in some wild flower or insect. Perhaps he had seen one of those in the grass. I cast a mildly curious glance in his direction and kept on walking. As I got closer, however, I realized that there was something odd about him. It was the intensity of the man's concentration. I was standing only a few feet away, staring at him, but he did not appear to have noticed me at all. He was still bent over the grass, his eyes fixed on it. Now I could not help asking a question. Have you lost something? There was no reply. Was he deaf? My curiosity rose. I was determined to see what happened next. So I lit a cigarette and waited. About 3 minutes later, life seemed to return to the man's limbs. He bent further forward and stretched an arm towards the grass. Then he pushed his fingers into the thick grass and a second later withdrew his hand. Between his thumb and index finger was held a small disc. I peered carefully at it. It was a button, nearly as large as a 50 paisa coin. Perhaps it had once been attached to a jacket. The man brought the button closer to his eyes, scrutinized it thoroughly, turned it around several times, then said regretfully, before placing it in his shirt pocket and striding off in the direction of the mall. He ignored me completely. Later in the evening, on my way back to the hotel, I ran into an old resident of Darjeeling, Dr. Bhomik. He was standing by the fountain on the mall. Dr. Bhomik was my father's classmate and very fond of me. I could not help telling him about my encounter with the strange man. When I finished my tale, Dr. Bhomik said, "Well, from your description it appears that you met Mr. Eccentric." Mr. Who? Eccentric. It's a sad case, really. I can't remember his first name. His surname is Mukherjee. He has been in Darjeeling for nearly 5 years. He rents a room in a cottage near Greenlace Bank. Before he came here, he used to teach physics in Ravenshaw College in Cuttack. I believe he was once a brilliant student and has a German degree in physics. But he left his job and came to live here. Perhaps he inherited some property or has some private income, so he gets by. Do you know him? He came to me once, soon after he got here. He had stumbled and fallen somewhere and cut his knee. It had turned septic. I treated him and he recovered. But why is he called eccentric? Dr. Bhaumik burst out laughing. He acquired that name because of his peculiar hobby. I could not tell you who was the first to think of that name. What's his hobby? You saw it yourself, didn't you? He picked up a button from the roadside and put it in his jacket. That's his hobby. He will pick up any old thing and keep it safe in his room. Any old thing? How do you mean? For some reason, I began feeling increasingly curious about the man. Well, said Dr. Bhaumik, I call it that, but he claims that every object in his collection is most precious. Apparently, there is a story behind all of them. How does he know that? Dr. Bhaumik glanced at his watch. Why don't you ask him yourself? He suggested. He is always pleased to have a visitor, for his stories are endless. All of it is pure nonsense, needless to say, but he is always glad to tell them. Mind you, whether you will be glad to hear them or not is a different matter. The following morning, I left my hotel soon after breakfast and went looking for Mr. Eccentric's house. It proved quite easy to find it, since most people near Greenlace Bank seemed to know where he lived. I knocked on the door of the house, number 17. The man himself answered the door almost at once, and to my astonishment recognized me immediately. You asked me something yesterday, didn't you? But I could not reply. Believe me, I just could not speak. At a time like that, if I let my attention wander, it can spell disaster. Do come in. The first thing I noticed on entering his room was a glass case. It covered a large portion of a wall. On each shelf was displayed a range of very ordinary objects, not one of which seemed to bear any relationship to the other. One shelf, for instance, had the root of some plant, a rusted padlock, an ancient tin of gold-flake cigarettes, a knitting needle, a shoe brass, and old torch cells. The man caught me staring at these objects and said, None of those things will give you any joy, since only I know what they are worth. I believe there is a story behind everything in your collection. Yes, there certainly is. But that is true of most things, isn't it? Say, if you consider that watch you are wearing. I began, but the man raised a hand and stopped me. Yes, there may be a special incident related to many things, he said. But how many of those things would continue to carry memories of the past? Of the scene they have witnessed? Only very rarely would you find anything like that. This button that I found yesterday, for example. The button in question was placed on a writing desk on the opposite end of the room. Mr. Eccentric picked it up and handed it to me. It was a brown button, clearly torn from a jacket. I could see nothing special in it. Can you see anything? He asked. I was obliged to admit that I could not. Mr. Eccentric began speaking. That button came from the jacket of an Englishman. He was riding down Jalapaha Road. The man was almost 60, dressed in riding clothes, hale and hearty, a military man. When he reached the spot where I found that button, he had a stroke and fell from his horse. 2 passers-by saw him and rushed to help, but he was already dead. That button came off his jacket as he fell from his horse. Did you see this happen yesterday? I mean all these past events? Vividly. The more I concentrate, the better do I see. When can you see such things? whenever I came across an object that has this special power to take me back to the past. It starts with a headache, then my vision blurs and I feel faint. Sometimes I feel as if I need support or else I would fall down. But almost immediately, various scenes start flashing before my eyes and my legs become steady once more. When the whole thing's over, my temperature rises. Every time. Last night until 8 o'clock, it was nearly 102. But the fever does not last for more than a few hours. Today, I feel absolutely fine. Everything he said sounded far too exaggerated, but I felt quite amused. Can you give me a few more examples? I asked. That glass case is packed with examples. See that notebook? It contains a detailed description of every incident. Which one would you like to hear? Before I could say anything, he strode over to the glass case and lifted two objects out of it. One was a very old leather glove, the other a spectacle lens. He placed them on a table. This glove, he told me, is the first thing I found. It's the first item in my collection. Do you know where I found it? In a wood outside Lucerne in Switzerland. By then, I had finished my studies in Marburg and was touring the continent before coming back to India. That day, I was out on a morning walk. A quiet and secluded path ran through the wood. After a while, I felt a little tired and sat down on a bench. Almost immediately, my eyes caught sight of only a portion of that glove, sticking out from the undergrowth near the trunk of a tree. At once, my head started throbbing. Then my vision blurred, and then I could see it all. It was like watching a film. A well-dressed gentleman, possibly an aristocrat, was walking down the same path. In his mouth was a Swiss pipe. On his hands were leather gloves, and he was carrying a walking stick. Suddenly, two men jumped out from behind a bush and attacked him. The gentleman tried to fight them, and in the struggle, the glove on his right hand came off. Those criminals then grabbed him, killed him mercilessly, and looted what money they could find in his pockets, and took his gold watch. Did something like this really happen? I had to spend 3 days in the hospital. I had fever and was delirious. There were other complications too. The doctors there could not make a diagnosis, but a few days later I recovered as if by magic. After leaving the hospital, I started making inquiries. Eventually I learned that 2 years earlier, a wealthy man called Count Ferdinand was killed at that same spot exactly as I had seen it. His son recognized the glove. Stay tuned for the next part of the story.